Now, the main reasons why I feel like this is actually something that happens and why this is the case is because, one, those are the guys that can usually manage to be with such women or can use such women and kind of show them the love and affection that they want. Now, the reasoning behind this is particularly simple. A lot of these driven, successful women tend to be particularly busy, and there's a certain way that...
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who might find it hard to breathe if you've got that asthma. He's also a man who definitely adds running his mouth to his cardio routine. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mighty handsome man, Sir Danverby, and I am here to talk about men. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna talk about. Considering in this particular episode, man is both victim and perpetrator, I feel like it is going to be an interesting one for me, but I do aim to defend or at least speak for at least some of that, while also recognizing the fact that there might be some bullshit that might be getting done on the other end. And that sort of balance of flavors is going to be particularly interesting. But should you like it, should you not like it, should you have a different form of feedback, or should you want to suggest a potential topic and or guest for the podcast, then the DMs are always open. The social media links are usually in the description, whether it's below, above, to the side, wherever it is that you find it on the app or platform that you use to listen to this podcast. And should you feel a little bit lazy and you don't feel like going and checking and clicking on those links, then I usually mention how you can reach me on social media at the end of the episode, so you can listen all the way till the end, and then you can hear that if you don't feel like going and checking out the description. But all in all, I do hope that you're enjoying what it is that you're listening to, at least for the quick minute or two that I've done, and you listen all the way up to the end. Now, I do need to get this show on the road, and I want to kick things off by talking about a particularly interesting scenario that happened last weekend. Actually, last weekend is a bit wrong. Maybe about the weekend before last weekend, as of the time of this episode going live. And it is actually the story of JP Morgan and the fact that apparently one employee or former employee claimed that another had sexually harassed him. And while it's believed that the guy was seeking a settlement of a good chunk of change, it was something that did turn into a scandal that ended up being posted up online and shared about, and eventually, over the course of a weekend, it was discovered that the entire story was fake. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm contributing like a part 2 to this story or anything. I was supposed to have discussed it last week, but I think I forgot, or I just had something else that I wanted to rant about. But, here we are. Now, that story happened and it was laughable for some people, a bit serious for others, and it did kind of do a bit of a credibility sort of crash and burn and then revitalization for JP Morgan. But I found something that kind of irked me in the entire story, not necessarily the story itself, but in how people handled it online. And I want to get into that because that was something that kind of did leave me a little bit concerned. Now, when the story unfolded, it was something that started probably about 2 weeks from when this episode comes out. It started the end of that week, and it was a story that had started developing very, very quickly, and people were starting the weekend by seeing the story as it was unfolding. And the guy had mentioned that, this lady had supposedly tried to sleep with him multiple times, had sexually abused him, had coerced him, I think, into doing things for her. So it was a story that was developing, and people were giving their own mixed reactions online, just the same way people online usually do. And of course, for some people, they decided to turn this into an entire meme. People were busy talking about how a bunch of people were busy trying to apply to JP Morgan as an analyst because they looked at the lady that had supposedly abused this guy, and they were like, yo, if this is the kind of woman that wants to harass me, all with the promise of promotions and shit, sign me up. I'll give into it willingly. Which is the typical reaction that a lot of men will usually have whenever they hear a man has been sexually harassed by a supposedly good-looking woman. So, guys were busy throwing in the applications, talking about how they wouldn't mind working at JP Morgan, and it was this entire meme that was going on. Eventually, after a short while, they discovered that the story was fake and the guy was making fabricated allegations against them. And so, like, it was this thing that happened, and while people were busy wondering who it is that made the allegations, they come out and they're like, you know what, these things are false, and whatever it is that this guy was saying was absolute BS. Even the lady isn't his direct superior in the company. And it was a pretty interesting shock for some people, while other people were like, shit, finally. But while that was happening, some news sites decided to post up the guy's face and his name and his credentials and everything. And when people actually saw his photo, and this was around the same time that it was being discovered to be a fake story, how people were reacting. And I'll say this because I was on TikTok, I was on IG when this story was unfolding, and the way women were reacting was in a way that kind of irked me because it just seemed very, very concerning. Because the moment this guy's photo was being plastered up, like his image and everything, that was when now, like, the comments were flooded with women who were busy saying, oh yeah, this one was definitely fake, she couldn't have done it with this guy. Oh, she wouldn't have done it with this guy. Oh yeah, this definitely certifies that this is fake. This one definitely means that this is fake. And the thing is, I can get what the guy did was shitty. And I totally agree with that. The guy shouldn't have done such a thing. That's absolutely stupid. Especially in a sector where people talk a lot. It's like the guy ruined all of his employment opportunities just like that. But how people reacted was what I found concerning, because y'all concluded that this guy was too ugly to be sexually harassed by a woman in the workplace. Like, do you know how wild that shit is? Especially coming from the gender that has always been big on how, rape culture is a thing and this isn't good and blah, 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 sexual abuse, Me Too movement. Like, for the same women, or at least for women in general, to come back and suddenly be like, oh yeah, this guy definitely didn't have any of the things that he said done to him just because of how he looked, was something that I found to be very, very weird. Because this is the same gender that talks about how it's not about the dressing, it's the act and blah, blah, blah. Like, y'all just discredited the guy because he wasn't good looking. Like, just think about that for a quick second. People were discrediting him because he wasn't good looking. And while I'm not on the guy's side or saying that what he did wasn't wrong, because it was, and I'm not on his side on this one, I feel like just that form of judgment by a lot of women online, or just a lot of people online, was just very, very wrong. Because you guys didn't wait to go and look for the allegations, or at least where all of those allegations were proven to be unsubstantiated. Nah, like, people just dived onto that where they were like, oh, so some shit happened at JP Morgan. Oh, it's this lady? Okay, let's see who it is that was supposedly sexually harassed or sexually abused by her. And then they look at the guy and they're like, nah, never happened. Like, do you know how wild that shit is? It's like if a male celebrity decides to go and sexually abuse a certain lady who isn't that good looking, probably doesn't have a good looking body or anything, and then she comes out and she's like, this man abused me, and then guys come out and they're like, nah, couldn't have happened. Yeah, this baby's lying. She looks like a bust. This shit could never have happened. Like, there'd be women that would be doing full-on campaigns with their virtual pitchforks, busy saying, oh, men this, men that, men are against us, blah, blah. Yet, the moment they have a chance to actually prove that the issue should not be on how someone looks, but on accountability and making sure that the evidence is right, they suddenly decide to turn and they're like, yep, this guy isn't that good looking. Like, that was something that I found to be very, very wild coming from the opposite gender. Like, there's other nitty-gritties to the story, and the story even develops beyond that because, apparently the lady wasn't the direct superior. Even recently, I saw a story where apparently this guy was getting all of his allegation information and basically doing prep for this whole allegation accusation from an online law chatbot. Like, I can go into that and it would be very interesting and shit because, like, that definitely adds more layers to it. But you look at it, how people responded just by looking at the guy's face and saying this guy is so ugly he wouldn't have gotten sexually abused and shit, was something that I found to be so weird and even a little bit concerning. Because if you guys are saying that about him, Like, what happens when other guys decide to come up and they're like, yo, shit like this has happened to me? Like, I feel like on one end, we should probably be blaming the women because, they would act like this, yet they're the same ones that expect us to act differently whenever their cases come up. But also, on the other hand, I low-key think that maybe we need to have more men coming forward about sexual abuse in the workplace so that people can realize that, one, this happens to men as well, and two, they can stop looking at it as, the only time when you can be a victim is when you're incredibly good looking, such that someone looks at you and concludes that you're irresistible, so they have to use any means necessary. Like, if we can start doing that, I feel like to some degree, maybe we can balance things out. But still, when you think about it, considering that there's a lot of people that still think like this across both genders, I find it very, very hard that such a thing would change. But either way, I did find it quite wild, but I'm going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of this episode. Now, for some of you, you might find as though to some degree, like whenever you look at a lot of successful women, you would probably think that they don't have many partners, or, their dating pool tends to be not as sufficient because finding a guy that's at a higher level than them is usually hard, and a lot of them are married. But we have seen cases where there are very successful women who end up with guys who may not even be as successful as them. Now, this phenomenon isn't particularly new, but it was something that did catch the eye of a particular Kenyan artist by the name of Mandy Kabaya, who decided to bring it up as sort of a piece of online conversation on one of the stories that she posted up not too long ago, where she was asking, is it that it's vibes or is it just good dick? Because how is it that all of these, or at least a lot of these very successful women, end up with guys who are either broke or drunkards? Now, I do want to get into the whole explanation of why I think that's the case, but before I can do that, it would probably be better if I started by letting her clip play where she asks the question. Then I can get into my thoughts on it. So, without further ado...
Mi niko na swali na mimi nataka jibu kwa sababu hiki kitu imekuwa ikinibother. Mbona unapatanga like them, especially like corporate women ama wenye wako employed ama just successful women, unapata msee ni mrembo, akona do, akona job poa, akona yani 10 out of 10, lakini akona mwanaume sijui ako aje. Like unapata the person she's with akona personality mbaya, ni mlevi, yani hata ukiwa kando yake, like wakisimama pamoja unashangaa shwali mbona akona clown, like mbona inakuanga hivyo? Ni universe ina try kuhumble huo dem ama nini na happening? Tunapata tu dem ni 10 out of 10, yani hadi akona do, akona nini, akona broke ni gana lewa, yani mbona inakuanga hivyo? Niko curious. Ni avoid.
Okay. Particularly interesting question that's been asked there. And I can understand the curiosity. It is something that does seem very contradictory. Like, you find this high-flying woman, she's been doing particularly well for herself. Then, out of the blues, you look at the guy she's dating and you're like, how? Like, what would make you want, to be with such a guy? And, I can totally get it to some degree. Not that I'm a woman or I have lady parts, but I can get the contrast and why some people would actually question it. Now, before I can get into my reasons on why I think this might be the case, though, let me just say, first off, I don't think that it's like all successful women. I do think that it's some. Now, honestly, I feel like there's a few reasons. I'd probably say 2 main ones, maybe 3, that would probably cause that, because I don't think it's particularly new, and I do think that it is something that can happen a lot. And even women that might think like they're immune from such a thing, they might actually end up finding out over time that they're not as immune as they think. Now, the main reasons why I feel like this is actually something that happens and why this is the case is because, one, those are the guys that can usually manage to be with such women or can use such women and kind of show them the love and affection that they want. Now, the reasoning behind this is particularly simple. A lot of these driven, successful women tend to be particularly busy, and there's a certain way that a lot of guys would want their babe to be with them that a lot of these women just aren't. And as such, you find that because a lot of guys might probably decide, I'm not really feeling this isn't my thing, I'm not willing to kind of do life with someone who acts or behaves like this, they kind of leave. And over time, as Shorty is busy enjoying her independence and kind of doing her thing out here, she meets a guy that is very okay with what she does, is very supportive, and let's say that it can even start by like laying pipe a little bit constantly. Then it can move on to things like them having more intimate discussions, spending more time together. And over time, this baby is just going to feel like, this guy is really giving me attention. This guy really cares about me. And, she can just end up dating this guy, especially when this guy decides to, bring in the card of, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that, but I just haven't made it yet. But you know what? I'm driven and I've got the vision and I'm still trying to chase it. So it can happen quite a bit like that. I feel like a lot of times it does tend to happen like that. And, she ends up dating the guy and she'll try to be this very supportive girlfriend. Not that her being supportive is a bad thing, but she'll try to be this supportive girlfriend and she'll really try to help the guy. But over time, she will start to wonder why it is that she is with this guy. And then maybe some chaos can happen, then they end up together again when she felt like leaving. But anyways, the long and short of it is she might end up choosing to leave this guy, or probably by the time she wants to leave the guy or she doesn't see much use in the guy has probably made sure that the both of them are like locked in for life. Maybe they have a kid or some shit like that. So it is very common to see such a thing happen. Then the second reason that I would think would cause such a thing to happen is the pressure of being with such a babe can actually kill the soul of a man to the point where he actually goes ahead and starts becoming a drunkard. Now, this might actually seem like a bunch of bullshit that I'm spewing right now, but I want you to walk with me on this one. Oftentimes, whenever you find these so-called successful babes choosing to date a guy, they'll usually want to date a guy that is also at about the same level, if not a little bit higher. And if you're a guy and you notice that there's a 10 that's, very brainy and managed to, achieve all of this shit in her life, suddenly it's like, oh, this is a proper babe. Like, me and her can probably build together. If you're into the whole like power couple type shit, then, you'll feel like it kind of really aligns quite well. You go ahead, you start dating this person, you end up together, and you have a pretty good relationship for a bit of a while. But let's say life happens and shit goes sideways, dude loses his job. Now, normally that shouldn't be a problem, especially if the both of you have been successful and you've been doing particularly well money-wise and you guys have good financial management skills. It shouldn't really be a problem, but over time, the longer you take without getting a job as a guy, and if you're not producing any income, the more likely it is that now her friends will start asking, and what does this guy do nowadays? Oh, are you sure that he's the right guy for you? It's like he doesn't do much. He's mostly just chilling at home. And don't get me wrong, like chilling at home might seem like just chilling at home, but you don't know if this guy sends 100 applications a day. All that they're hearing is he just chills home. So now they'll start to question the validity of his value. And normally this is something that, if allowed to permeate, can start to drive a wedge, because that's usually when you'll find that the babe will be like, you know what, let me start trying to push this guy. And then they'll start saying things like, I don't think you're putting in enough effort into trying to get a job or into trying to get this business back up. And maybe you should try doing this, and this. And they'll usually start to try and recommend strategies. And oftentimes, if not presented well, can come off as very condescending, even though the babe feels like, you know what, I'm giving this guy advice. And it's not like the guy is immune from this shit as well. Like, he can also go through shit like this from his side of the court, whereby he can go ahead and he's still trying to do his thing. The babe is supportive. And as there's other women that are in this babe's ear, and at some point in time, she's at home or she's chilling with you and the rest of the boys, she decides to ask you to do something, and maybe how it came off wasn't all that good, and the guys all of a sudden start saying, bro, how is it that your baby's controlling you? or your baby's bossing you around now. Kwani, what's going on? And when something like that happens, now that can also drive a wedge if allowed to permeate within the relationship, because now the guy will start feeling as though his dominance is being questioned. And it's usually stuff like this that tends to begin a cycle of abuse for a lot of people, whereby like the guy has been made to seem as though he's not enough of a man or he's not a dominant figure. So now he has to assert his dominance. So it's very easy for such cases to turn abusive, because this guy feels like he has to assert his dominance at the number one place where his dominance should have been asserted in the first place, which is usually the household. And if the guy is unable to assert dominance, or if he isn't the type to go down the abuse route, which, is usually the most recommended thing, oftentimes you find that those guys kind of go down and down, in that they can end up falling into depression, and maybe they might use alcohol as like a coping strategy or a coping mechanism, and they just start drinking a lot more because they have a lot more time. So now they can go and chill and drink a lot more, and they can end up turning into the broke drunkard that people usually talk about, even though the problem isn't that this guy wasn't in a good position before. It's just that some shit happened along the way that kind of killed his momentum. So there's that. There's definitely that. Then, last but not least, it's not like the one that you'll hear the most, but a lot of times you find that those are the ones that will probably hit on the very successful women. And, maybe the babe just wants to be the guy for the sake of having a kid, or they just want to start a family and they find that the guy is good looking enough, or he comes from a good family. And she's like, you know what, fuck it, I might as well just go and have this with this guy. I don't hear a lot of these cases, but I do believe that they happen. So there's that as well. And oftentimes you find that when some or all or one or two of these situations happen, it's very common to see how this is a very beautiful, successful woman. Then you look at the guy that she's with, and it's like this guy is like a walking byproduct of a brewery. So on one end, it doesn't look as good, but on the other end, a lot of times people never try to investigate where the origins of such are, which I've at least tried to detail. And the truth of it is, like I said earlier, much as this does happen, it doesn't happen to all women or all successful women. I don't even think that it happens to most successful women. I feel like it does happen to a number of them, but not every or even most successful women. So it can happen, and you can see it a little bit here and there, but I do think that the case, while not nuanced, isn't as common, but I do foresee its commonality growing over time. And I say this mainly because when you look at the fact that there are more women that are getting more educated than ever, there are more women that are climbing up corporate positions than ever, and there's a lot fewer guys that seem to be staying in school and or are trying to scale up the corporate ladder, you realize that we're going to have a lot more women that are making a lot more money, and they may have to date down. Otherwise, they probably may not have much, if any, options out here in these streets. So I do foresee a situation where a lot of these might happen, and it's an unfortunate scenario for a lot of people, actually for just about anyone, but it is something that I can foresee happening quite a bit. One, because there's a lot more women that are becoming successful, but also because there's a lot of men, and dare I say older men, that will come back and kick you when you're in the ground, because they're like, you know what, as a man, what are you doing not providing for your woman? Like, there'll always be that push and pull, because when you're in a situation like that where your baby's more successful than you, it's very common for your peers and other men to make you feel as though you're less, or even for you to feel like you're less because your babe makes more than you. And so it is very common for a lot of men to be in this situation where they are broke and or drunkards, not because their babe has pushed them there, but because their social circle, their friends, the men around them basically made them feel like they have to show that they're dominant. Otherwise, the fact that they can't provide, the fact that they're not in the best financial position, or at least have surpassed their partner as far as finances is concerned, then suddenly they're not enough men and they'll be dropped, or they're not worth it as far as being a man is concerned. So I will agree to some degree. men do contribute to this problem as well. So now that we know this, can we avoid it? Is there a way that we can probably get around this? To be quite honest, you can't entirely be sure that you'll be able to get around it, just like many other things whenever it comes to relationships. But I do believe that the best way to avoid such, if you're the babe, is to remain submissive at all times, regardless of how much he earns. And I say this because there's a lot of successful women that basically try to bring whatever strategies that got them up in corporate to a household with a guy, whether or not this guy is making a lot of money. Which is how a lot of quote-unquote successful women end up missing out when it comes to the dating market, because you have this high-flying professional that's been doing super well in the office, and they believe that because they're at a senior position there, they deserve to be treated and act a certain way in the office, and that it should translate to the rest of their lives. And then they come to the house, they are trying to be with the guy, and the guy isn't used to that, and the guy doesn't want that, because it's not corporate politics, it's not trying to go up the corporate ladder, it's trying to build a home with someone, which requires a different set of strategies entirely. And if you as a babe aren't willing to understand that and actually fall in line with it, then it is very, very common for a guy to leave a babe, not because she isn't successful, yet she is, but because just dealing with her is just so bad and something that he does not feel as much pleasure as people would think out here in terms of dating her. And so this is a situation that does happen. Now, if you are a man and you do end up in a situation where your babe makes more than you, don't let the money get into your head and cloud your judgment. Just conclude that, it's her time, she's making her bank, and you might just have your chance as well. Treat her with respect, treat her with kindness, but also don't take disrespect. If you get to a point where you're being disrespected, if you feel like it's time, up and leave. If you don't feel like it's time, you can stay there, but just know that there might be a whole load of depression that might come your way that can turn you into a broke drunkard. But with all of that said, let me just conclude by saying that there is hope for successful women out there. I do believe that the dating market does have great guys that can choose to be with you and that can be great to you, regardless of whether they make more or less than you. The problem usually comes in when you bring your corporate strategies into the household and you try to assert dominance and you think that you are supposed to be batting on the same level as the guy, yet that may not be how the guy perceives it. So maybe, just maybe, exercising some level of submissiveness might actually be your best bet as far as nailing a great guy down. Although, then again, considering that I haven't been in too many of these situations, maybe I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Maybe I'm just chatting a bunch of shit. But either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On IG, it is at the breaktime_podcast. On Facebook, it is at the breaktime podcast. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. And on Bluesky, it is at the breaktimepod.bsky.social. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end. And now we'll catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.